All right. So up until this point, we've been doing OOP and like writing functions and creating classes and objects and methods and stuff. But every time we run a program, it's like you run it, you create like instances of stuff, and then once the program runs, everything kind of gets lost. So what we don't have is persistence. So what happens after the file is ran? Where does that data go, or where should it go? So where should you store data?
Depends on the use case, but probably a database.
Yep, we can store data in databases. That's very common. You're going to be working with databases a lot in this cohort and as a software engineer. What are some places where people store data? Just
local storage.
Local storage. So in the web browser, web browser actually has some storage mechanism built into it called local storage, where you can store data. How about if like you're just like working at home and you want to store you're like writing a budget or something, where would you store data?
Excel spreadsheet.
I heard Excel spreadsheet. James, did you say something?
CSV file.
CSV file. So Excel is very common. CSV, people use them. Excel, CSV, they're practically the same thing, but a little bit differently. But they conceptually you can import a CSV file into Excel. So yes, definitely. When you are, Google, there's Google Sheets as well. That's pretty much identical to Excel. But in the real world, at whatever company you're at, I'm sure at some point you've had to use Excel in some manner on an exam in like high school or college. Essentially, there's just also things called CSV files, comma separated values, very similar to Excel. But in the business world, 9 times out of 10, there's salespeople, analysts, data scientists. They're going to be utilizing CSV files or Excel or something very similar to that. So CSV files are not going away anytime soon. So for example, at my first job, as a developer, like the sales team or the product team wanted to know specifically what users are doing, essentially the path of the user on the website. When they click login, we record an event, we store that into a database. But product managers, analysts, they don't know how to query. There's not an easy way for them to like read our database and get all the information from a user from a database. So what they do, they come to us. They say, hey Tom, hey Tanya, I need a report that spits out the user path or the pricing or how much revenue a client is generating for us. And I need that from a database. So your job is to go in there, write a script, write an app to go in there to actually grab that data from a database, spit it out into a CSV file and hand that off to the salesperson, the product team, some analyst, something or some position that is not a developer. So what I'm saying is that CSV files aren't going away, and it's one of, if not the most popular way to store data, to make data persist. It is in fact a small database. So yeah, any questions about CSV files before we actually jump in and actually start utilizing CSV files? No. Awesome. All right. So what I'm going to do is share my screen, which I don't know where Zoom went. All right. Share screen, desktop 1. All right. So here we have a CSV lecture. So if I wanted to create a CSV file, how do I create a CSV file?
You can just touch a file and
Yep.
have a .csv on it.
NFL teams. We're going to do something with NFL teams just to print off scores or records or whatever. So yes, CSV files have a .csv at it, just like it's a .javascript file, .python file. It's just .csv file. And if I go to here, here's Google Sheets. You can actually export this as a CSV file. It almost looks like Excel. So yeah. So inside of here, let me actually open up a new window. What makes CSV files unique is that, does anybody remember what CSV stands for?
Comma separated values.
Yep, comma separated values. And what are some things that you will want to do, not just with a CSV file, but with a database? Like, what are some functions that people want to perform on a database or a CSV file or an Excel file?
Input data.
So you can input data. So you can create data. What else can you do?
Group things, perform different functions such as sums and averages and stuff across different groups of data. And,
Yeah, so that's like that's like specific to Excel and all that. So like when you're interacting with data in a database of some manner, what are like the main operations that you want to perform on that database?
Cut data in, get data out.
Create, read, update, destroy.
Right.
Yep. All right. I heard all of them. Create, read, update, destroy. CRUD. So we can create data. We can update data. So data that we've created, we can update that data. We can read that data. So we can just read from the database or from the file or whatever. And we can destroy data. So you're going to hear this acronym called CRUD, C-R-U-D, create, read, update, destroy. So those are the main operations that we want to perform on either a database or a CSV file or just any data that we want to persist in some manner. So
I thought D was delete. Did they change it?
it's interchangeable.
Okay.
I think technically, the official is like destroy, but I always say delete. Anyway.
Destroy sounds more dramatic. I kind of like it.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about and while we are storing data into a CSV file or a database, it doesn't really matter. What are some things that are important when we are storing data? What are some things that we should consider when we store data? So for example, I want to create a CSV file or an Excel file or a database that has a team, an NFL team, the number of wins and the number of losses. So how would I store that in like a database such as Excel or CSV? So like up here, if I wanted to store wins, losses, and the team names, what's up?
You would make a table.
So make a table. When you say make a table, like tell me like how should I architect that table?
So within like Excel or this specifically, you would just create, well, you would use the columns to make your different headings. So you would have your team, win, losses.
All right, perfect.
Or actually in this, yeah, I guess that one.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
no, yeah, you're 100% correct. It's like we would have some headers or like what each column looks like. So what data is in that column. So for example, in column A, we have team, column B, we have wins, and column C, we have losses as well. So yeah, so things we have to consider is like how we're going to organize that data. I'm sure if for those of you who have like pretty like some experience working with Excel and like manipulating data, like doing pivot tables and all kinds of crap, like it can get really ugly if the data isn't formatted or structured or organized properly. So we have team, we have the number of wins and the number of losses. So start thinking of a database, even a CSV file, as like a table. And you'll hear that word table come up quite a bit. So if we were creating a CSV file that's kind of similar to this right here, with we have headers with team wins and losses up here. So up here, CSV file stands for comma separated value. So each value is separated by a comma. So we have like teams, wins, and losses. So each, essentially each comma, the value in between each comma represents like a column. And I'm actually going to also add an ID here. So we have an ID, the teams, we have the wins, and we have the losses. And we can do, and each value or each value, yeah, I guess, what am I thinking of? So there's values, and then each, Ankur, what am I thinking of? If there's a
Key?
I'm sorry?
Sorry, were you thinking about keys and values?
There's keys, values, but like if I did like bears, what are they, 2 or 3 and 2? What would this whole thing be?
A record?
A record, yes, thank you. So yeah.
Quick question. Why are the teams and losses highlighted blue and green respectively?
So I have an extension that just separates them just for visually speaking, so you can see specifically. So
What's
I have
called?
geez, I think it's
Everyone download it quick.
CSV, Rainbow CSV.
Yes.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier to read CSV files within here. So
my mentor literally took me through every extension I needed yesterday.
nice. So each one of these are called like an entry or a record. So that the record, so here we have column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, and then we have an entire record, and then we have like each value or entry within. So yeah. So we have a CSV file, so you can kind of see represent by the colors here. The teams are in blue, and that's just a file or a Chromic or VS Code extension that kind of just makes reading from CSVs a little more visually easier to read. And so we have a CSV file, and now let's actually talk about like, all right, let's do NFL script. So I'm going to create a Python file called NFL script, and what I'm going to do is read and write, update and delete from, or I'll just say read and write to this CSV file. Oh. All right. So Python has a really great library called CSV. CSV Python. And this allows, because writing scripts to read and write to a CSV file is very common in the business world. And I think I mentioned, as I mentioned before, that you will have to read and write from a CSV file, whether it's you want to do some data analytics on something, whatever you want. There's a lot of open source data out there. And so you want to read that data and do something with that data, whether it's like plot it on a graph or extract addresses from a CSV file and put it in Google Maps, something like that. So say I want to read from this CSV file.
Hey, Tom, is there a way to make comments in a CSV file?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. So the first thing I'm going to do is import the CSV module or CSV library that's already comes built in with the Python language. And here, the first thing I'll need to do is open up the CSV file. So I can do say with open, and as a string, I need to type in the path to the CSV file I want to read from. So NFL teams.csv. And because I'm on the same level as this, it's just CSVs files or NFL teams.csv. So I'm opening the CSV file as, and now I can name it a variable as NFL teams file. That's just what I'm going to call it. And now I'm just going to print NFL teams file. So see what that looks like. So I'm going to do Python NFL script. So notice here, I've got this text IO wrapper object. It has the name of the file. It says some mode R. Does anybody know what mode R stands for?
Read.
Yep. So it defaults to reading from the file. We'll talk about what that means. And encoding UTF-8, don't even worry about what that is right now. But just know that this is what that file is. So this NFL teams file is now represented by this NFL team. So this NFL teams.csv file is represented by this NFL teams file variable now. So now I can go ahead and read from the CSV file. So I'm going to do CSV underscore reader equals CSV reader. And I'm going to pass in this NFL teams file. Now let's go ahead and print this CSV reader variable. I'm going to clear that. So I've got this reader method, and I pass in this file, whatever is represented by this file, which is this NFL teams file variable. I can come in here and just read the documentation. So the CSV module defines the following functions: reader, where I'm actually passing in that CSV file. And you can read through the reader object, will iterate over lines in a given CSV file, and you can read those lines. And it gives a quick example right here. So I've got this CSV reader. Now let's print that. So now here is this reader object. And now I can actually iterate through for row in CSV reader. I'm going to print the row. So now I get a list where each entry represents an index, or is represented by the index inside of the list. So I've got, it's reading from the very first. It reads the headers, ID, teams, wins, losses, like so. And if I wanted to get, the team name, I can grab it by the index 1. Clear. Teams, Bears, Lions, Packers, etc. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I had to restart my computer. It was just repeating the recording in progress.
Gotcha. So I can print each row, and this row represents a list. But interacting with lists isn't always easy, because maybe I want to access the wins, but I don't know off the top of my head what index the wins column is. So there's another way I can read from the CSV file. Very similar. So I'm just gonna come down here.
Wait, Tom, can we do, I imagine there's a column word as well.
Say that one more time. There's a column word.
Yeah, you just printed by row. I imagine you can print by column as well. So is column a keyword as well?
No, so the CSV reader, I can loop through. It's like so if I print that out, it's just a reader object. And I can, this CSV reader, I can just print through. It just prints each row. There isn't a column where you can just print all the columns.
So I can grab the teams in any way.
Only like just all the teams.
Yeah, I want just the teams.
So for column in CSV reader, something, if there's like CSV column reader, is that what you're like? CSV column reader or something. And so this would just print the column, like an array of.
So column is a keyword?
No, it is not.
I think they're just variable names that you made.
Okay, I understand that, but can we print?
No. You cannot just grab each column.
Oh, that seems impractical. Okay.
Well, we'll show you. So if I print each, I'm sorry. Because usually you want to grab each row. You don't want to just grab a column. And we'll talk about how to do that. Or not how to grab each column, but how to grab each value at the team column. So it's going to loop through. It's going to iterate through the entire CSV file and print each row represented by a list.
Okay. Yeah, I get it. You would just do the rows and then just grab the index of the specific team.
Yep. But like, you don't necessarily know what value that you're looking, what index the value you're looking for is at. So there's another way we can do that. If we look at the documentation, if we read up, so the CSV module's reader and writer objects. So we'll talk about the writer objects, read and write sequences. Programmers can also read and write in dictionary form using a Dict reader and a Dict writer. So very similar to how we went up there. We can do just CSV reader. Again, this is just a variable I'm creating saying, hey, this is going to be a CSV reader. And I'm going to say a Dict reader. And I'm going to pass in that NFL teams file. And if I print this CSV reader this time, it's going to be a Dict reader object. CSV Dict reader. And now, again, it just loops through each row. So for row in CSV reader, I can print each row out. And this is going to look kind of interesting, but not really. Notice how it's a dictionary where the header is the key and the value is every value or every entry in that column. So if I wanted to grab just all the teams, how can I do teams? I don't know if I can do that. So Dict object has no attribute teams. So I can do, this is where I need to do like so. So Dict reader allows you to access the column like you would a dictionary. Does that make sense?
That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah,
I just got ahead of myself. Sorry.
Yeah. So there's this Dict reader. You can read from, essentially converts these into a dictionary, but the Dict reader always makes the very first column represented by the headers. The very first row are the headers. So sorry, let me take a step back. It assumes that it has headers. So it makes the very first row's values the keys on the dictionary or on the Dict reader.
Hey, Tom, I have a question.
Yep.
Is there a way to make the first column the keys instead of the first row?
Like ID, teams, wins, losses right here?
Yeah, like that first column. The
No.
IDs. Okay.
Nope. So it always assumes that because it'll start to make sense when we actually start to get into like databases where always the very first row represents the headers. So you can grab the teams, the wins, losses, clear that. Bears 8 and 8, Lions 6 and 10, Packers, etc. So that's one way we can read from. Those are two different ways we can read from the NFL teams CSV files. Now we can write. Let's talk about writing. So very similar line with open NFL teams.csv, but remember what mode it defaulted to?
Read.
Yep, it defaults to read. So we can actually pass in another argument, mode equals W, which stands for write. So you can write to the CSV file. So as NFL teams file, let's actually close that. Great. So now I'm going to print NFL teams file. Clear the terminal. So now we get the mode is W, which stands for writing. So just like we did with CSV reader up here, we can do CSV writer equals CSV.writer. Remember here, the CSV module's reader and writer objects read and write sequences. So we have the CSV writer method or object, and we can pass in the NFL teams file. And now, what just happened? Now we can write to the CSV. So they have a method called write row, which will actually write a row to the CSV file. So I can do CSV, let's actually do headers equals ID, because it's going to write to the, because it needs a headers, teams, I guess team, wins, losses. So I can do CSV writer dot write row, pass in the headers or headers like so. And now I can also pass in another list of, let's say 5 with an ID. Name another football team. Anybody? Ravens. What's their record? Do you know?
4-1, I believe.
Oh, dang. So we got Ravens. Who else do we have? I don't even know. Browns. Going to the Browns game this Sunday. What are they at?
3-2.
3-2. All right. let's clear it. So let's run this file. The script NFL team script. And let's see what happened. Watch this CSV file. So if I run this, watch what happens with the CSV file. Uh-oh. What happened?
It just overwrote all of the data, didn't it?
Yep. It just overwrote all of that data, which is not good. We don't want to do that. So there's another mode. I'm just going to come down here, copy that over. So the mode, if you don't pass in any arguments, the mode defaults to reading from the CSV file. You can also pass an argument mode W, which stands for writing over, but writing writes over the entire CSV file. But there's another, let's just do mode. Why isn't mode? Does it even mode even on here? Mode. There's another mode. Instead of writing over it, we can append to it. So I'm going to click back, which is nice. You can just undo if you actually write over anything. A stands for append. So if I'm just, command at Z to like undo. So if I'm appending to this, I don't need to add any headers to the CSV file. I can just append directly to it. So if I wanted to clear that terminal and run that script, there you can append to the CSV file. What questions do you have about reading, reading using just the basic reader or Dict reader, or writing to it or appending to it using just the basic writer object?
So for reading, whenever it reads in, it takes in rows, right? And then for each value, does it just assume like the different types that would be?
So that's a good question. So what are the types if I read from a CSV file? So I'm just going to read basic. If I read from it, let's look at the types. They're all strings, even if you want them to be a number, they come out as a type string. So if you want to do something with this data, you'd have to convert it to your respective data type that you want. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. Same with here with the Dict reader. These values will be type string. So you can be like, so let's see what the type. Is it type of, or is it type?
Type in Python, I believe. And just a word of advice, when you're working with these challenges, I would recommend create a backup CSV file, because I've overridden my data, and sometimes if you don't Control C, it might not retain the history if that file is not open. So yeah, make backups would be my recommendation.
So yeah, the type is string, the wins. So everything's type string. So let's talk about writing using the Dict writer now. So again, just get used to this weird syntax with open NFL teams.csv. We're going to write to it or append to it. I don't want to overwrite anything. So I'm going to do mode equals A as NFL teams file. CSV writer equals csv.dict writer, And here, there's a couple of things I can pass in, or let's just run this one way. So I can do dict writer like so. But let's actually, yeah, let's look at dict writer. Scroll all the way up. Dict writer is a little more involved. So the dict writer takes in the file. It also can take in the field names. So like the column headers, creates an object operator. And then now you can actually look at this example. Field names takes in an array of column headers, and you pass in that CSV file. And then you also pass in a variable field names equals field names. And then you can, there's a method called write header, which will actually first write that header value, and then whatever dictionary you want to write to. So following that logic or that example, I can do headers equals ID, team, wins, losses. And then here I can do field names. So it already kind of knows. I'm going to do the headers because that's what that is. All right. I guess it would be header. And then since I'm actually, I guess, since I'm appending to it, I don't even think I'll need to do the write header function because this is a write mode, which will overwrite everything. But yeah, let's actually just see, let's overwrite everything first. So I can do CSV writer dot write header. And there we go. And now I can do CSV writer dot write row. And now I can use a dictionary or ID equals, let's do 7 teams equals who else? Chargers wins. I don't know. Does anybody know the Chargers record? So let's do 7, 8 teams. Did I already do Vikings?
Sorry, Chiefs 5-0.
5-0.
I meant Cardinals. Cardinals. Sorry,
Oh, too late.
I was thinking red.
I don't even know Cardinals. I don't even know how to spell it. So if I run that, it overwrites it because I'm using the write mode. But if I don't, if I just want to append to it, I'm going to change that to an A. Get rid of that write header because I don't need to write the header anymore. I'm going to back this out to redo it. I'm just going to leave a space there. Clear. And now if I run that script, I get, it appends to it. What questions do you have about NFL or working with CSVs?
I'm guessing there's a method for like editing.
No.
Oh, okay.
This is where it gets kind of ugly. It's like, so I'm just gonna pause the recording. Actually, I'll kind of just, well, before I jump into it, does anybody have any other questions?
You may have went over this before. If you did, I missed it. On the CSV file, before you append to it, do you have to add a new line under it? Because I tried to append without having, like, let's say you have just 9 lines in that file. If I tried to append to it doing the same exact thing and it just added on to the 9th line and then continued forward, it kind of messed it up.
Great question. So if I like, so I'm highlighted this window. If I like go away from it, it saves the file and it automatically creates a new line. But when you append to it, it does matter where the line, your last line exists. So if I were to run this again, and I'm starting on line 16, it's going to append to line 16, like so. Notice, see how it did that? So when you are working with CSV files, just make sure that your cursor is at the very top, and you should never have that problem. So I can keep it doing that. Yeah. But so I'm guessing you don't have VS Code settings to when you navigate away that it automatically saves your files.
I do have it like that. It automatically saves anytime I move my cursor out. I may have just done something. I'm not sure why it happened.
Okay, well, that's good.
Should we get rid of that if we're doing this?
No, you should always have it saved because it automatically adds a new line to it. But even if you do this and go away, you still have 16 lines. So it's going to append to the 16th line, which you don't want. So just make sure you don't have more lines in your file because it's going to append to the last active line. What other questions do you have?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
When you print the file, are you able to select, like if you wanted to see a specific line in the file, are you able to just select that, or do you always have to print the entire CSV file?
You'll have to loop through the entire CSV file. But then here, if you're printing, whether it's a Dict reader or just the basic reader object, you can add logic in here. If something equals something, then print it. So like for here, maybe I just want to know what the Bears file or the Browns record is. I can say if row teams equals, is it Browns? Print the row. So if I do that, I'm gonna comment that out and run that, I get the Browns, 6 teams, etc. But yeah, there's not a way it reads the entire file. It won't just like, all right, start reading from line 20 to 30.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right.
I had a question down at the bottom on the writer file that you had down there.
Yep.
You defined header and then you put the IDs in there and then you kind of re-put in the IDs and the writer right window down there.
Yep.
Do you have to do that? Because I mean, you've kind of defined in the line above field names equals header. I'm just trying to figure out if what you did in those previous 2 lines, what it did, or what could be omitted from the line below if you left it in.
So if I left this, so this part, if I left these out, I'm sorry, the IDs out. So the Dict writer requires the field names argument to be passed in.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then in the bottom line, you couldn't leave out those IDs because it doesn't go through and look for just like, hey, make the first one ID 1. If you just typed in instead of ID, you just type 7 comma Chargers comma 2 comma 2.
Correct. No, when
it wouldn't know how to understand that. It's okay.
Correct. And let's like run this without like actually typing in an ID. See what it does? It just leaves those IDs blank and it just makes sure that the columns, it's in the correct column.
Right.
Sorry.
And if you took teams off of in front of chargers and you just left as the string chargers, it doesn't know how to handle that.
Yeah, because if I took teams off of chargers, this data structure, it's supposed to be a dictionary. So you have to pass in a dictionary.
Oh, you have, okay.
To dict writers, yes. So if you have a dict
it.
writer, you have to pass in a dictionary when you're writing or appending to the CSV file. So that's for dict writer. Now, dict reader, you have to read, or I'm sorry, just a basic writer, you have to pass in an array. So like this just basic writer one. When you write to it, you have to pass in an array. So writer utilizes arrays. Dict reader requires, just think of them as dictionaries or objects, but it's really a dict reader or a dict writer object.
And then I guess the last question is, we had all the same syntax, both in the script file and in the NFL teams file. I'm assuming that it would freak out if you didn't have the right syntax, or would it for that last the right row? Yeah. So we have everything matches both in headers in the right there and over on the right in the NFL teams. If there was a mismatch there for, instead of teams, we put team.
Like so.
Right. And then yeah, down, you'd obviously have to update it down below. Otherwise it's going to throw.
Yep. So when it's trying to append to that, it's saying, hey, there isn't a teams in the field names. So it doesn't know what to do. Yep.
But even if you match in the line below, when it goes over to the CSV, it won't match. So if you put something else there.
Oh no, it will. So if I put something else here, it should, let's see. Yeah. So it just, yeah, I guess it just looks at whatever's in the second column.
It's kind of looking internally, and then it's just pushing over to the other one, just that row, essentially the same way that it pushed the array above. It's pushing essentially an array at that point.
Yeah, I don't know if it's actually pushing an array, but yeah, it's saying, hey, in the second column, there's a thing called something else. So when you go ahead and write to it, put whatever value is in the something else key, put that in the second column.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
A couple other questions, Michael. Sean?
Yeah, I have a question. So you said like there's no clean way to edit like a particular line. What if we were going through like this CSV file and we noticed that line 6 wasn't an NFL team at all and we need to remove it? Is there a way to do that?
You would literally, so you'd go through, probably add each one of these dictionaries into an array and just remove that dictionary or each. So like if this was like something random, you'd loop through and you know that random is not a or an NFL team. So you loop through, probably store each NFL team in some data structure, either an array or dictionary. Once you get to random, don't include that into whatever the array or dictionary. So like skip over it and then add these to the array or dictionary. And then you'd have to rewrite that to the CSV file.
Okay. So if you have a single typo, you have to recreate the entire file.
But it's easy because you're a developer, so you only have to write the code once.
Okay.
So
yeah, all the questions you guys are asking, these are reasons why databases exist. So everything about writing, position, where it's been write to, yeah, databases are generally better, but obviously harder to work with.
So with that, I'm going to go back into OOP app users 3. Just real quick. And maybe I wanted to store all the app users in a users.csv file. And I want to have a name, drivers, license, and email. So when I go ahead and create a new user instance, let's see. I'm just gonna, so create post. Actually, no, it's not. Yeah, I'm just coming off with the top of my head. So when I create an instance of a user, I'm going to save that user. I'm going to add that here. I might get def save user. This probably should be a class variable, but I can do like with open users.csv mode append as user CSV. And here, what is it? What was the headers equals an array name like so, and then users writer equals CSV dot dict writer. So I need to import CSV. I can pass in users CSV field names equals headers, and then users writer dot write row, and maybe a dictionary that has a name equals self dot name drivers license. Is that right? And email. And I'm just going to do self dot save. So if I wanted to actually just create a user, just real quick, new user or U1 equals user, Tom. What comes next? Email. CD users, Python user. Am I gonna get an error? Oh, no module import post. Just for ease of use. So we're not getting any errors. Oh no. Driver's license. Oh man. Email address. There we go. So I just created a user and I saved it to a CSV file. I know I ran through that really fast. This is not technically part of the lecture, but so you can create a method called like save user and save that to a user CSV file. And you can do the same thing with posts with posts.csv.
So why did you have to have a instance attribute with the self.save user?
As opposed to just like creating user and having it saved to the database? Or
Yes,
just like creating
instead
a
of just
dictionary?
having your method.
Right, because we're gonna, as our programs expand, you're gonna want each user, because you're just gonna have like a dictionary of users. Is that like so? So have like a method called like save user, you mean? And just have this just be just saved to the database?
Yes.
Because this is where you want to like organize your code using whether a functional program, you could definitely just use like a save user, or you can use OOP, which we're doing now. So this is just a way we're going to be organizing and structuring our code. Again, this is just like a programming paradigm where we're going to want to store all of our users' data within an object, so we can perform functions on that object. So we want that user object to persist within our program to perform, print user post, create post, and also pass that user instance all around our application. So now I have an instance of that user. I also happen to save that user into the database simultaneously, but I still have that instance of that user. So now I can do other things with that user. So it's still kind of like persisting, and I can pass stuff to it, change things, change attributes. So I can still do stuff to it. Because if I just did this, I just have like the save user, now I can't really do anything else. I'm going to have to read from that database again to change something. Whereas here, this user instance still persists, and I can change stuff to it and then like resave whatever data I want to the database.
Okay, thanks.
And go ahead.
I'm not sure if I misheard her. Did she say user instance or a user attribute of save user? Because I want to make sure I'm understanding as well, because you're actually in the init, you're actually calling the function, right, and executing the function. So it looks a lot like an attribute, but it's that last line is actually not an attribute, right? That's a hey, execute this function on the user, right?
Yep. So ideally I wouldn't do that. So I'd probably just do u1.save user. That's probably more. That's something I'd probably do instead of.
So you're saying usually you don't want to execute functions every time you create an instance. I mean, it seems like something you would want to do, like especially if you're appending to like a repertoire of like every instance of something.
It depends on how you want to. Again, it's like a design style of what you want.
Okay.
But yeah, I just wanted to show you just real quick that you can create like a method to save a user in a database or in a CSV file. Don't get necessarily caught up on like, I just did it in here just so I can create an instance and automatically save right away. You don't always have to do it like that. This is probably the more common way you should probably do it within a program. All right.
Just to go off of that, you could have easily just done it under create a post, right? As you were creating a post, you could have sent it to your own like list or dictionary, and at the same time sent it to the CSV file.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. All right. With that, I'm going to stop.